Have you ever stayed in a relationship longer than you should have, hoping that love could overcome everything, even humiliation and self-doubt? This story isn't just about a man and a woman. It's about the struggle for dignity, self-love, and the painful realization that true worth doesn't come from the approval of others. As we age, we often face the temptation to prove ourselves, sometimes sacrificing our happiness in the process. But what if I told you that love should never cost you your self-respect? In this video, you'll follow the emotional journey of an elderly man who found himself trapped in a relationship that slowly stripped him of his dignity. But despite the pain, he eventually discovered the courage to walk away, reclaim his identity, and rediscover his self-worth. Why should you watch until the end? Because the lessons in this video are life-changing. Whether you're facing similar struggles or just seeking wisdom on the importance of self-love, this story will teach you how to recognize when a relationship is draining your value, and why sometimes accepting solitude can be the healthiest choice. Don't miss out on this powerful message about embracing your true worth at any age. Make sure to stay with us till the end. You won't want to miss the profound wisdom that comes with embracing self-respect and love. Before we begin, I would appreciate it if you like this video. You can help me continue to spread the old age lesson. If you haven't subscribed yet, I recommend you subscribe and turn on the bell so you don't miss any videos. If you like this video, please comment number 1. If you don't like it, comment number 0 to let me know, so I can make a better video for you. Now let's get started. In the beginning, everything seemed like a dream come true, as if he had stumbled upon a second chance at a life he believed had long since passed him by. It felt as though the universe had given him an unexpected gift, a new beginning, and he embraced it with a sense of wonder and gratitude. She showered him with compliments that were more than just flattering. They were like warm sunlight breaking through years of cold, lingering self-doubt. Her words felt crafted with care, as though she had an intimate knowledge of exactly what he needed to hear to reignite a fire inside him that had long been dormant. She called him strong, capable, and wise, reminding him of the depths of his character that he had almost forgotten. She spoke of his age with reverence, telling him that it gave him a kind of gravitas and charm that no younger man could ever hope to emulate. Her affection seemed so genuine, so consuming, that it began to reshape how he saw himself. Slowly, he started to believe in a version of himself he had long since abandoned, a man who was still virile, desirable, and most importantly, worthy of love. Every look she gave him seemed charged with an energy that made his heart race. Her smiles were more than just expressions of kindness. They held a playful, almost seductive power that made him feel as though he was the object of her deepest desires. Every gesture she made seemed to exude a deliberate grace, as though she had mastered the art of making him feel like he was the only man in the world who mattered. It was as though she could make him feel as though he was the most important person on earth without ever saying a word. Eager to keep her gaze upon him, to continue basking in the warmth of her attention, he bent over backward to please her. He went out of his way to ensure her happiness, treating her like a queen who had bestowed upon him the rare privilege of her affection. Nothing seemed too extravagant, nothing too troublesome, and certainly nothing felt like too much effort for her. She wasn't just a woman to him. She was a living embodiment of youth and vitality, a force that made him feel alive in ways he hadn't felt in decades. Her presence revitalized him, reawakening desires and passions he thought were beyond his reach. In her, he found something that transcended his age, something that made him believe in the possibilities of life once again. But as the days turned into weeks and their relationship settled into a more familiar rhythm, small cracks began to appear in the seemingly perfect facade of their world. At first, they were so subtle, almost imperceptible, little things that could be easily dismissed as quirks or misunderstandings. Yet, over time, the cracks grew. She began to offer suggestions framed as well-meaning advice, but there was an unmistakable undercurrent of criticism that he could no longer ignore. "You really should take better care of yourself," she said one day, her tone light, almost casual, but with a subtle edge to it. "A man your age shouldn't be struggling with things like this." He tried to laugh it off at first, brushing the comment aside as nothing more than a playful remark. But as the days passed, the remarks didn't stop. They came more often, disguised as concern but landing with a sharpness that he couldn't ignore. What started as mild suggestions slowly morphed into constant criticisms, and he began to feel the sting of her words every time she spoke to him. Her voice, once full of warmth and admiration, now carried a subtle edge of superiority. It was as if she was reminding him, not so quietly, that she was younger, fitter, and more vibrant than he was, and that perhaps he had outlived his usefulness. His self-esteem, which had been so carefully nurtured by her early affirmations, started to erode beneath the weight of her words. He began to feel the tension between them, a quiet dissonance that gnawed at him. Her tone, once tender and affectionate, now seemed laced with judgment. And yet, despite this growing unease, he convinced himself that it was just a rough patch, that these were merely passing phases that would eventually smooth themselves out. After all, the early days of their relationship had been so perfect, hadn't they? The tipping point came, as it often does, in the most intimate part of their connection. She began to criticize his performance in bed, a sacred space where vulnerability and intimacy should have been nurtured, not attacked. Her words felt like daggers, piercing through the carefully maintained facade of confidence he had so long relied upon. For a man who had always prided himself on his ability to love deeply and provide emotional satisfaction, her remarks were devastating. "You're slow," she said one night, her words sharp and biting, as though she had no regard for the vulnerability he had offered. "Predictable. I need more than this." If you are still watching this video and finding these lessons useful, please comment number 1 below to let me know that you are still watching this video with me. Thank you for your valuable time. She compared him to younger men, something he could never compete with, no matter how hard he tried. It wasn't just his body she criticized. It felt as though she was undermining his very essence as a man. She made him feel as though he no longer had a place in her world, that his years of experience and emotional depth could never measure up to the raw vitality of someone younger. Yet, in the same breath, she would occasionally offer crumbs of approval, just enough to keep him hooked. She would tell him that no one else could love her with the same tenderness and dedication he had given her, that his care was something younger men lacked. But these fleeting moments of approval only served to further confuse him, leaving him desperate for more, never quite able to reconcile the love she once gave him with the criticisms that were now so frequently directed at him. These fleeting reassurances, though seemingly comforting, were often veiled in mockery. She would laugh at his earnest efforts to please her, dismissing them as desperate attempts to win her favor. He failed to recognize the manipulation at play and caught up instead in the hope of proving himself worthy of her attention and affection. To him, each small gesture, every attempt to make her smile, felt like an opportunity to finally break through her walls, to win her over completely. He was blind to the toxic undercurrent of their relationship, unable to see how deeply it was eroding his sense of self. If you're still watching this video and find these lessons resonating with you, please comment 1 below. Let me know if you're still here with me on this journey of understanding and growth. He clung to the belief that love required patience, sacrifice, and an unyielding commitment to the other person. He told himself that if he could just endure the pain, if he could hold on long enough, she would eventually recognize his worth. But instead of things improving, the storm of emotional turmoil only intensified. Her words, sharp and biting, began to carve away at his confidence. Each cruel remark, each dismissive comment, left him feeling smaller, weaker, less than the man he once was. The man who had once stood strong in his identity and self-respect was fading away, replaced by someone who barely recognized himself. His perception of himself began to shift. He no longer saw the person he had once been, someone who had lived through life's trials and emerged wiser, stronger, and more resilient. Now, he saw a man growing older, clinging desperately to a fading youthfulness, fearful of becoming irrelevant. His aging body and graying hair reminded him daily of the passage of time, but it was her eyes that made him feel like a relic, someone who had outlived his usefulness. He was no longer a man of experience and wisdom in his own eyes. Instead, he felt like an object of pity, a reminder of what could have been, mocked for his attempts to stay relevant. For anyone observing from the outside, his decision to remain in the relationship might have seemed inexplicable, even pitiful. How could someone so experienced, so wise, continue to endure such treatment? But love, especially when it morphs into something toxic, has a way of binding its victims with chains they cannot see. It wasn't just her youth or beauty that held him captive. It was the hope she offered, those fleeting moments of tenderness and warmth that made him believe things could change, that they could be better. It was the promise of something more, even if it was just a distant dream. He was a prisoner not just of her manipulation, but of his insecurities, of his desperate need to prove his value to someone who refused to see it. The tragic aspect of his story resonates deeply because it's all too familiar. How many of us have found ourselves trapped in relationships, situations, or patterns of behavior that drained us, simply because we believed that our love or sacrifice could heal what was broken. How often do we allow ourselves to be diminished, to shrink and shrink, hoping that one day someone will see our worth, that our efforts will be enough to change things? His story is a painful reminder of the dark side of love, the way it can lift us to euphoric heights, only to drop us into the deepest, most despairing lows. He wasn't just trying to win her approval. He was fighting a far deeper battle. He was struggling to reclaim a piece of himself that had slipped away, a piece he feared he might never get back. He fought to hold on to his self-respect, to maintain his dignity in the face of relentless emotional warfare. And it was that fight, more than anything else, that ultimately broke him. One evening, after yet another argument that had left him feeling bruised, both emotionally and mentally, he retreated to the sanctuary of his room. The silence in that space felt overwhelming, the weight of the evening pressing down on him, each word that had been exchanged echoing painfully in his mind. Each cruel remark replayed like a loop, digging deeper and deeper into his soul. The sting of feeling small, insignificant, and unworthy had become a constant companion in his life, a wound that had festered for too long. But tonight, something was different. Tonight, for the first time in what felt like years, he felt a shift. It was subtle at first, a quiet stirring within him, but it grew with intensity until it became impossible to ignore. The dull ache of unhappiness that had been gnawing at him for so long finally broke through the surface, and he realized with painful clarity that he had reached his breaking point. In front of the mirror he stood, gazing into the reflection of a man who had lived a long, challenging life. He studied his face, noting the lines that had etched themselves into his skin over time. Those wrinkles, he realized, were not marks of failure. They were the traces of a life well lived. They told the story of challenges faced, love given and sometimes lost, battles fought and survived. His hair, now graying, was a testament to the years he had endured and the wisdom he had gained. Yet, at this moment, he couldn't help but feel that somewhere along the way, he had allowed himself to be reduced to something less than he was. He had let someone else's perspective overshadow his sense of worth, his identity. And it was in that moment of deep reflection that he finally understood something profound. Self-love had to come first. It wasn't about arrogance or selfishness. It was about survival. He could no longer live as if his value was dependent on the approval of someone who refused to see him for who he truly was. He could no longer diminish himself to fit into a world that had no place for his experiences, his wisdom, or his heart. For the first time in years, he made a decision purely for himself, and though it was terrifying, it felt necessary. If you are still watching this video and finding these lessons useful, please comment number 2 below to let me know that you are still watching this video with me. Thank you for your valuable time. The following evening, with a mixture of fear and determination, he sat down to have a conversation with her. This time, he approached the conversation with a calmness he didn't know he had within him. Looking her in the eyes, he explained how he felt, how the relationship had slowly eroded his self-esteem, how he could no longer endure being treated as if he were invisible, as if he were inadequate. He told her that love should never come at the expense of his dignity, and no matter how deeply he had once cared for her, no matter how much he had hoped things could change, he could not continue down a path that forced him to sacrifice his self-respect. He was ready to walk away. The conversation, though deeply painful, was also incredibly liberating. She dismissed his words as nothing more than overreactions, dramatic outbursts fueled by emotion. But for the first time, he didn't back down. He didn't raise his voice or lash out in anger. Instead, he stood firm, grounded in a way he had never been before. Not in defiance, but in the quiet strength of knowing his worth. It was a bittersweet moment. A part of him mourned the end of what they once shared, the love and connection that had once brought them together. But there was another part of him, a part that had been dormant for so long, that rejoiced in the beginning of something new: self-respect. When he stepped out of the house, his heart was heavy with sorrow. Letting go of someone he had loved, someone who had been a significant part of his life for so long, was never going to be easy. The weight of the years they had spent together, the memories, the shared dreams, it all seemed to collapse in on him. Yet, there was also an undeniable sense of relief. A burden he hadn't realized he had been carrying for years seemed to lift from his shoulders. For the first time in what felt like forever, he could breathe easily. The air felt lighter, and with every step he took, the world seemed a little less heavy. He hadn't just walked away from her. He had walked toward something far more important: himself. The days that followed tested his resolve in ways he hadn't anticipated. Loneliness crept in, quietly at first, and then like an unwelcome guest, it wrapped itself around him, refusing to leave. Nights, especially, were the hardest. He missed the comfort of having someone else in the house, the familiar rhythm of shared time together, the sound of another voice, even the simple peace of a companionable silence. But as the days stretched into weeks, something remarkable began to happen. This loneliness, though sharp and at times overwhelming, was different from what he had known before. It wasn't the hollow ache of feeling unappreciated, unloved, or invisible. No, this was a dignified solitude. It was the kind of solitude that gave him space to breathe, to think, and most importantly, to rediscover himself. He began reflecting on his life, not through the lens of regret, but with a sense of gratitude for all that he had endured, all the lessons learned. He thought back to his younger self, full of hope, dreams, and possibilities, and he realized that man still existed deep within him. Over the years, he had buried that version of himself, trying too hard to please others, to mold himself into something he wasn't. But now, slowly, he was reconnecting with parts of himself that had long been forgotten. He reached out to old friends, people who had known him before he lost pieces of himself in this relationship. He rediscovered hobbies and passions he had abandoned, enjoying the simple act of creating, of exploring, of being himself again. One day, standing in front of the mirror, he looked at the man staring back at him with new eyes. This time, he didn't see just his age or the wrinkles that had appeared over the years. He saw resilience. Each line on his face told a story, not of time lost, but of triumphs, of survival, of love given without expectation. The graying hair, once something he feared, now felt like a badge of honor, a symbol of the wisdom he had earned, the lessons he had learned. He no longer saw himself through the judgment of others, or through the lens of a past relationship that had drained him. He saw himself as he truly was, a man of value, strength, and infinite potential. As months passed, his world began to bloom in ways he hadn't anticipated. He traveled to places he had always dreamed of, experiencing new cultures, new sights, and new adventures. He immersed himself in the beauty of the world around him, finding joy in the small things, watching a sunrise, losing himself in a good book, sharing laughter with an old friend. He began to realize something profound. His worth had never been dependent on anyone else's approval. It had always been there, just waiting for him to claim it, to recognize it, to embrace it. Through it all, he learned that true love, the kind that nurtures, supports, and cherishes, begins from within. It's the love we show ourselves that sets the standard for how others should treat us. And as he moved forward, he carried this lesson with him. Life is too precious to waste it trying to prove your worth to someone who refuses to see it. Aging, he came to understand, isn't about loss. It's about uncovering what truly matters, rediscovering the parts of ourselves that time and experience have shaped, and realizing that peace is not found in the arms of another, but in the quiet contentment of our hearts. This deeply emotional story serves as a powerful reminder for those who may be struggling with doubts about love, companionship, and self-worth, especially as they grow older. The yearning for love is one of the most universal and deeply ingrained desires we experience as human beings, transcending age and circumstances. As we grow older, it becomes more essential than ever to remember that the pursuit of love should never come at the cost of our inner peace, our self-respect, or the values we have spent a lifetime cultivating. In the later stages of life, many may feel the desire to reconnect with the passion and vitality of youth. However, this desire can carry risks, especially when it leads us to compromise our dignity, to lose sight of what we truly need in a relationship, and to invest in connections that do not uplift us. This story illustrates the profound transformation of one man, whose journey through love and heartbreak became a powerful lesson for anyone who has ever struggled to reconcile their emotions with their sense of self-worth. Looking back on his experience, he realized that the relationship he had entered, though it seemed promising at first, was not a true partnership. It was a one-sided dynamic that slowly eroded his sense of self. The younger partner, vibrant and full of life, could not truly understand or appreciate the depth of his experiences, the wisdom he carried, or the vulnerability that comes with aging. And so, he found himself caught in the trap of trying to prove his worth in ways that no longer felt authentic, that no longer honored the man he had become. Ultimately, this is a story of self-realization, of reclaiming one's identity, and of embracing the power of self-love. It is a poignant reminder that, as we age, we can rewrite our stories and rediscover our worth. At first, the excitement of this new connection clouded his judgment, making him blind to the subtle cracks in its foundation. Like many older individuals, he was naturally drawn to the idea of recapturing the vibrancy and energy of his youth, an energy that seemed so effortlessly alive in his past. He longed to feel needed again, admired for who he was, and alive in a way that only the rush of new love could inspire. For a while, everything felt fresh and exhilarating. The flurry of emotions, the flutter of attraction, and the promise of a new chapter all seemed to offer a sense of vitality he thought he had lost. But over time, as the initial glow began to fade, he started to see the hidden costs of this relationship, not just in the immense energy he had poured into it, but in the quiet, insidious erosion of his sense of self. Every compromise he made, each time he ignored that subtle inner voice that once guided him, pulled him further and further away from the person he had spent decades becoming. He realized that what had seemed like a rejuvenating spark was taking more than it was giving. Deciding to end the relationship was an incredibly difficult and emotional process. It wasn't a decision he came to lightly. It took immense courage and deep self-reflection, the kind that demands confronting uncomfortable truths. But in that moment of walking away, he found a powerful act of reclaiming his identity. He understood that love, in its purest and most fulfilling form, cannot thrive in an environment where one constantly feels the need to prove their worth, or where their value is measured by another's expectations. True love is built on a foundation of mutual respect, where both partners see each other for who they truly are, with all their flaws, strengths, and uniqueness, not for who they hope or wish the other to become. In choosing to step away, he not only demonstrated his strength and resolve but also embraced a profound lesson in self-love. It was an affirmation of the importance of prioritizing his own dignity, peace, and well-being above everything else. Through this act, he showed himself in the world that self-respect is non-negotiable, that you cannot pour from an empty cup, and that protecting your inner integrity is a form of self-preservation. If you're still watching this video, and you find these lessons resonate with you, please take a moment to comment below and let me know that you're here with me, reflecting on these truths. This realization marked a powerful turning point in his life. No longer did he view the end of the relationship as a failure. Instead, he saw it as a profound learning experience, one that reshaped his understanding of his worth. He learned to value himself more deeply and, importantly, to set boundaries that safeguarded his peace of mind and emotional well-being. He came to understand that his worth as a man was not tied to his ability to meet someone else's standards, nor to reliving the past, but was found in his integrity, resilience, and unwavering commitment to live authentically. Even in the face of criticism or societal pressure to conform, he knew that the most important thing was to remain true to who he was, no matter the cost. For those of us in our later years, this story carries an even more significant message. Each wrinkle etched into our skin, each gray hair that marks the passage of time, symbolizes the life we've lived, the experiences, the growth, the lessons learned along the way. To sacrifice that hard-earned wisdom, to compromise the dignity that comes with age in the pursuit of fleeting validation or approval from others, is to lose sight of the richness and depth of our journey. Older individuals, perhaps more than anyone, understand the immense value of self-respect. They recognize that true fulfillment doesn't come from external accolades or temporary affirmations, but from living in alignment with one's deepest values and principles, unapologetically. Living authentically becomes a badge of honor that reflects the wisdom, strength, and clarity gained over the years, a treasure that should never be bargained away for anyone or anything. From this deeply moving story, I want to share 5 essential lessons for older individuals navigating relationship challenges, particularly those that may arise as we enter the later stages of life. 1. The illusion of youth. While it might seem tempting to recapture the vibrant energy and zest of youth through a relationship with someone younger, it's important to remain grounded in the reality of what truly sustains a relationship. Youthful charm and exuberance can be captivating, but they are not replacements for authentic connection, mutual respect, and shared values. The character in the story, like many of us, found himself investing time, emotions, and energy into a relationship with someone who couldn't truly understand or appreciate the richness of who he was as a person. What seemed exciting at first turned into frustration and confusion as he struggled to prove his worth, only to realize that genuine love cannot be built on the pursuit of validation from someone who doesn't fully see or honor you. It's vital to remember that true connection transcends age and superficial attractions, and it thrives when mutual respect and appreciation exist between both parties. If you are still watching this video and finding these lessons useful, Please comment number 3 below to let me know that you are still watching this video with me. Thank you for your valuable time. 2. The danger of compromise. It's natural to want to avoid loneliness, especially in later years, but love should never require us to sacrifice our core values or accept treatment that diminishes our self-worth. The fear of being alone often leads people to tolerate behavior or situations that, earlier in life, they would never have accepted. When we settle for relationships that undermine our dignity, we are doing ourselves a disservice. Love should not feel like a battlefield where we are constantly tested or enduring hardships for the sake of another. It should be a sanctuary, a place of mutual respect, support, and understanding. As we age, we must learn to recognize that compromising our integrity for the sake of companionship can come at too great a cost. No relationship should ever devalue who we are at our core. 3. The importance of self-love. To be truly loved, we must first love ourselves. Self-love isn't merely a cliché or a fleeting act of self-care. It is a deep, inner recognition of our inherent worth. It involves accepting not only our strengths but also our vulnerabilities, our flaws, and the marks that life has left on us. Self-love is the bedrock of all healthy relationships. Without it, we risk losing ourselves in the pursuit of approval from others, trying to be someone we are not, or, worse, tolerating mistreatment because we don't believe we deserve better. Loving ourselves is not an act of selfishness. It is a moral obligation. When we fail to recognize our worth, we leave ourselves open to being misused, disregarded, or undervalued. He discovered, through painful experience, that self-love is necessary for maintaining our dignity in the face of difficult relationships. It is the foundation that allows us to stand strong and secure, knowing that we deserve kindness, respect, and affection, not as a luxury, but as a basic human right. 4. The power of integrity. A person's value is not determined by their age or their ability to meet societal expectations. What truly defines a person is their integrity, their commitment to living truthfully, in alignment with their values, and their ability to navigate life with resilience in the face of adversity. Integrity is what transforms the challenges we encounter into opportunities for growth, wisdom, and strength. As we age, it is more important than ever to stay true to ourselves and to honor our principles, even when society or others try to pressure us into conforming. By doing so, we not only maintain our self-respect but also become role models for others, showing them the power of living authentically. 5. The gift of reflection. Every relationship, no matter how difficult, provides an opportunity for growth and learning. By reflecting on our experiences, we can gain deeper insights into who we are, what we need, and how we can build healthier, more fulfilling connections in the future. In the story, the man's relationship becomes a mirror, revealing both his vulnerabilities and his strengths. Through this painful process, he learned more about himself than he could have imagined. Reflection is a powerful tool for growth, helping us uncover the lessons hidden within even the most challenging circumstances. By taking the time to reflect, we can gain clarity about what truly matters to us and what we need in our relationships to thrive. This story is a profound testament to the courage it takes to prioritize yourself, especially when it means walking away from something that has become familiar, even though it may no longer be healthy or nurturing. It reminds us that true happiness is not found in the validation of others or the fleeting comfort of toxic relationships, but in the quiet confidence that comes from living in alignment with our values and honoring our self-worth. For anyone in their later years grappling with the complexities of relationships, let this be a beacon of hope, a reminder that it is never too late to choose dignity, self-respect, and authenticity over the illusions that society or others may try to impose. The story of the name of love serves as an act of noble sacrifice, a beautiful expression of his commitment and strength. However, as time passed, he began to realize that what he had once thought of as selflessness was the slow erosion of his dignity. Every dismissive remark, every unfair judgment, and every moment of being overlooked slowly stripped away his self-respect. He came to understand that love should never demand the abandonment of self, but rather inspire mutual growth, respect, and care. True love nurtures, uplifts, and honors each person for who they truly are. Loving yourself is not just about personal care, it is an essential moral responsibility. Without a solid foundation of self-worth, we risk allowing others to define our value. When we forget our worth, we make ourselves vulnerable to mistreatment, neglect, and disrespect. He came to realize that self-love is not a luxury. It is necessary for maintaining our boundaries, self-respect, and dignity. Without this understanding, Love can become a cage rather than a sanctuary, confining us in unhealthy dynamics that prevent us from truly flourishing. This revelation, though painful, became the turning point in his life. It was the first step toward reclaiming his life and his identity. The most transformative lesson came when he finally found the courage to say enough. Walking away wasn't just an act of defiance, it was a declaration of liberation. It wasn't just about ending a relationship, it was about reclaiming his self-worth and peace. He realized that choosing to walk away from a toxic relationship was not a failure. It was an act of strength and courage. Solitude, which he had once feared, became his refuge. It was no longer a punishment to be avoided, but a sacred space where he could begin to heal and rediscover himself. In the quiet solitude of being alone, he discovered a profound truth. The peace that comes from self-respect and self-love is more valuable than the fleeting comfort of a dysfunctional relationship. If you are still watching this video and find these lessons useful, please comment 3 below to let me know you are still here with me. For the first time in many years, he felt what it was like to simply be enough for himself. No longer defined by the expectations or judgments of others, he found solace in solitude. It was in this quiet space that he began the delicate process of rebuilding his self-esteem, piece by piece, each moment of introspection a small step toward wholeness. Solitude became not a void, but a sanctuary, a time to pause, to reflect, and to rebuild. It allowed him the freedom to reconnect with his inner self, to rediscover what he truly desired, what he valued, and what dreams had been buried beneath the noise of other people's opinions. In this space, he came to understand that being alone is not something to be feared. Rather, it is an opportunity to reclaim parts of yourself that have been lost in the shadows of another's expectations. Solitude offered him the chance to explore who he was without the pressure of conforming and to understand his worth without external validation. If you are still watching this video and finding these lessons useful, please comment number 4 below to let me know that you are still watching this video with me. Thank you for your valuable time. As he embraced his journey, he began to shift his perception of aging. No longer did he see it as a loss or a sign of decline, as society often paints it. Instead, he learned to view aging as a gift, a precious gift of experience and wisdom. In a world that worships youth, where beauty and vitality are often equated with youthfulness, he realized that every wrinkle on his face told a story of perseverance, every gray hair was a testament to lessons learned, and each slower step marked the depth of the life he had lived. Aging, he recognized, was not something to hide or feel ashamed of, it was something to honor. With each passing year, he had gathered not only years but stories. Stories of triumphs, challenges, and growth. The physical signs of age became, in his eyes, badges of honor, symbols of a life fully lived, rather than something to be concealed or feared. He understood more deeply now that those who place value on the superficial, who measure a person's worth by appearance rather than character, will never truly see the richness of a person's soul. He had spent too much time trying to fit himself into the narrow, shallow molds that others tried to impose on him, but in doing so, he had betrayed the very essence of who he was. He learned that real pride doesn't come from meeting society's fleeting standards. It comes from embracing the journey that has shaped you, accepting your flaws as much as your triumphs, and finding strength in both. He learned to take pride in his experiences and the person he had become, complex, multifaceted, and ever-evolving. This newfound sense of pride led him to a kind of freedom that he had never known before, a freedom that came from no longer seeking validation from those who couldn't appreciate his true worth. He no longer needed to prove himself, because he had already acknowledged his value. One of the most profound realizations he came to during this period of self-discovery was about the balance of giving and receiving in relationships. He began to understand that true physical closeness, that deep bond between two people, was not just an act of affection or a simple gesture of intimacy. It was a language in itself, one that spoke louder than words. As his physical vitality waned with age, he found that the quality of his touch, the depth of his attentiveness, and his willingness to put his partner's needs before his own communicated more about his devotion than any youthful energy could. But even as he understood the power of giving in love, he also came to realize that love cannot flourish in an environment where reciprocity is absent. Acts of love and intimacy should never feel like obligations or be met with indifference. True intimacy thrives on mutual respect, understanding, and the acknowledgement of the effort each person invests in the relationship. This clarity led him to an even deeper understanding of love, that no matter how much you care for someone, love cannot grow without reciprocity. Genuine affection, no matter how sincere, loses its meaning if it is not valued. A one-sided relationship, even if built on the strongest foundation of affection, can only go so far. True love, he realized, is about creating a space where both people feel seen, heard, and cherished, where both can give and receive in balance, and where each person's contributions to the relationship are acknowledged. Without that balance, even the most heartfelt gestures fall short, and the connection begins to fade. In the end, he understood that walking away from a relationship that no longer served him wasn't an ending, but rather a new beginning. It was the start of a new chapter in his life, one where he no longer needed to prove his worth to anyone because he had already recognized it within himself. Through the pain and heartache of letting go, he discovered a strength he had never known he possessed. In finding the courage to step away, he found peace, not in seeking someone else's approval, but in the quiet, unshakable certainty of his value. He realized that life is too precious to spend trying to please those who cannot see the depth of who you truly are. The greatest love story, he came to understand, is the one you write with yourself. The journey of self-acceptance, self-respect, and self-love is the most rewarding of all, for when you finally love yourself, you are free to live authentically and joyfully, without the need for external validation. Thank you so much for spending this time with me today as we reflect on the powerful spiritual messages and encouragement shared. I hope that as you listened, you felt the comfort and guidance that comes from God's promises. Life can be overwhelming at times, but no matter what challenges you face, remember that you are never alone. God's love and presence are always by your side, guiding you through each step of your journey. As we wrap up, I encourage you to pause for a moment and think about everything we've explored together today. What is one thing that stood out to you the most? Is there something you've learned or a new perspective that you plan to bring into practice in your own life? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Please take a moment to comment below and share one key lesson or takeaway that you will carry forward. If this video has been meaningful to you, don't forget to leave your comment below, like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel so you can continue to receive these messages of hope, encouragement, and spiritual growth. Your support helps spread this message to others who may need it. May you feel God's love, peace, and strength as you walk through each day, trusting that He is with you every step of the way. Thank you for being part of this community, and I look forward to connecting with you again soon. Take care and God bless.